Hello friends, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. I am Nopur. Today is 13th June and it's 6:15 in the morning. I just saw from my window the beautiful sun, and then I just started to come to the jungle, and I just parked my car in the jungle and reading the story for you, the book I brought with me, and the big wave pearl is back. We are just going to see who came to visit Kino's father and what happened to Jiya and Kino and the life of two boys now clubbed together. So let's begin our story. The fireflies had come out, but this light was steadily climbing the pathway toward their house. "I wonder who comes," Kino exclaimed. "A visitor," his father replied. "But who can it be?" In a few minutes they saw the visitor was old gentleman coming from the castle. His manservant carried the lantern, but old gentleman walked behind him very sturdily with the help of a long staff. They heard old gentleman's voice in the dusk. "Is this the house of Uchiyama the farmer?" old gentleman asked. "It is," his servant replied, "and the farmer sits there at his door with his son." At this, Kino's father stood up, and so did Kino. "Please, honored sir," Kino's father said, "what can I do for you?" Old gentleman came forward. "Do you have a lad here by the name of Jiya?" "He lies sleeping inside my house," Kino's father said. "I wish to see him," old gentleman said. Anyone could see that this old gentleman was one who expected to be obeyed. But Kino's father only smiled. "Sir, the lad is asleep and I cannot wake him. He suffered the loss of his whole family when the big wave came. Now sleep heals him." "I will not wake him," old gentleman said. "I only want to see him." So Kino's father led old gentleman tiptoe into the room where Jiya slept, and Kino went too. The servant held the light shaded by his hand so it would not fall on Jiya's closed eyes. Old gentleman looked down on the sleeping boy. Jiya was very beautiful, even though so pale and weary. He was tall for his age, and his body was strong, and his face showed intelligence as well as beauty. Old gentleman gazed at him and then motioned to the servant to lead him away. They went again to the dooryard, and the old gentleman turned to Kino's father. "It is my habit when the big wave comes to care for those who are orphaned. 3 times the wave has come, and 3 times I have searched out the orphans and the widows, and I have fed them and sheltered them. But I have heard of this boy Jiya, and I wish to do more for him. If he is as good as he is handsome, I will make him my own son." "But Jiya is ours," Kino cried. "Hush," his father cried. "We are only poor people. If old gentleman wants Jiya, we cannot say we will not give him up." "Exactly," old gentleman said. "I will educate him and give him fine clothes and send him to a good school, and he may become a great man and an honor to our whole province and even to the nation." "But if he lives in the castle, we can't play together any more," Kino said. "We must think of Jiya's good," Kino's father said. Then he turned to old gentleman. "Sir, it is very kind of you to propose this for Jiya. I had planned to take him for my own son. now that he has lost his birth parents. But I am only a poor farmer, and I cannot pretend that my house is as good as yours, or that I can afford to send Jiya to a fine school. Tomorrow, when he wakes, I will tell him of your kind offer. He will decide." "Very well," old gentleman said, "but let him come and tell me himself, so that I will know how he feels." "Certainly," Kino's father replied proudly. "Jiya will speak for himself." How unhappy Kino now was to think that Jiya might leave his house and go and live in the castle. "If Jiya goes away, I shan't have a brother," he told his father. "You must not be so selfish, Kino," his father replied. "You must allow Jiya to make his own choice. It would be wrong to persuade him. Kino, I forbid you to speak to Jiya of this matter. When he wakes, I shall speak to him myself." When his father was so stern, Kino did not dare to disobey, and so he went sadly to bed. He thought when he drew his quilt over him that he would not sleep all night, but being young and tired, he slept almost at once. Yet, as soon as he woke in the morning, he remembered Jiya and the choice he had to make. He got up and washed and dressed and folded his quilt and put it into the closet where it stayed during the day. His father was already out in the field, and there Kino went and found him. It was a beautiful mild morning, and a soft mist covered the ocean so that no water could be seen. "Is Jiya awake yet?" Kino asked his father when they had exchanged morning greetings. "No, but he will wake soon, I think," his father replied. He was weeding the cabbage bed carefully, and Kino knelt down to help him. "Must you tell him about old gentleman today?" Kino pleaded. "I must tell him as soon as he wakes," his father replied. "It would not be fair to let Jiya grow used to thinking of this as his home. He must make the choice today before he has time to put down his new roots." "May I be there when you talk with him?" Kino asked next. "No, my son," his father replied. "I shall talk to him alone and tell him all the benefits that a rich man like old gentleman can give him, and how little we who are poor can give him." Kino could not keep from wanting to cry. He thought his father was very hard. "But Jiya will certainly want to go away," he sobbed. "Then he must go," his father said. They went into the house to have breakfast, but Kino could scarcely eat. After breakfast, he went back to the field, for he did not want to play. His father stayed in the house, and he could hear Jiya getting up. For a long time, Kino stayed in the field working alone. The warm tears dropped from his eyes upon the earth, but he worked on, determined not to go to the house until he was called. Then when the sun was nearing the zenith, he heard his father's voice. He got up at once and walked along the path between the terraces until he reached the doorway. There his father stood with Jiya. Jiya's face was still pale, and his eyes were red. He had been crying today, although until now he had not cried at all. When he looked at Kino, his tears began to flow again. "Jiya, you must not mind it that you cry easily," Kino's father said kindly. "Until now you could not cry because you were not fully alive. You had been hurt too much, but today you are beginning to live, and so your tears flow. It is good for you. Let your tears come, and do not stop them." Then he turned to Kino. "I have told Jiya that he must not decide until he has seen the inside of the castle. I want him to see all that old gentleman can give him for a home. Jiya, you know how our house is. These 4 rooms and the kitchen, this little farm upon which we have to work so hard for our food. We have only what our hands can earn for us. Kino's father held out his two hard-working own hands. Then he went on, Kino, you are to go with Jiya, and when you see the castle, you must persuade him to stay there for his own sake. Kino heard this and felt the task laid upon him was very hard, but he only said, I will go and wash myself, father, and put on my good clothes. No, his father said, go as you are. You are a farmer's son. So the two boys went down the mountainside, and avoiding the empty beach, they went to the castle. The gate was open, and the garden was most beautiful. A gardener was sweeping the green moss. When he saw them, he came over to them. What do you want? He asked. My father sent us to see the honored old gentleman, Kino heard. Are you Uchiyama boy? The gardener asked. Yes, Kino replied, and this is Jiya, whom old gentleman wants to come and live here. Follow me, if you please, the gardener said. He bowed to Jiya and made his voice polite. The two boys followed him along a wide pebble path. Over their heads the ancient pines leaned their crooked branches. In the distance, beyond the forest, the sun poured down upon a flower garden and a pool with a waterfall. How beautiful it is, Kino whispered sadly. Jiya did not answer. He walked along, his head held high. When they reached the house, they took off their shoes and followed the gardener through a great door. Inside this, the gardener paused, and a manservant came forward and asked what they wanted. The gardener whispered, and the manservant nodded. Follow me, he said the boys. So they followed him through wide passageways. The walls were of fine polished wood, unpainted but smooth and silvery. Under their feet, fine woven padded mats were softer than the moss beneath the trees. On both sides of this passageway, panels slid back to show beautiful rooms, and in each room were a vase of flowers, an exquisite scroll, a few pieces of dark polished furniture. Neither Jiya nor Kino had ever seen such a house. Kino was speechless. How could he hope now that Jiya would not want to stay in the castle? Then far in the distance they saw old gentleman sitting beside a small table. The table was set in front of the open sliding panels that looked into the garden. And old gentleman was writing. He held a brush upright in his right hand, and he was carefully painting letters on a scroll, his silver-rimmed spectacles sliding down his nose. When the two boys came near, he looked up and took off his spectacles and laid down his brush. Would you like to know what I have been writing? He asked. Neither Kino nor Jiya could answer. The great house, the silence, the beauty, all of this fell into place as the background for old gentleman himself. He was tall and thin, and his hair and beard were white. His face and hands were beautiful. The bones were delicate, and the skin was smooth and brown. He looked as proud as a king, but his dark eyes were wise as an old scholar's eyes are wise. It is not my own poem, he said. It is the saying of a man of India, but I like it so much that I have painted it on this scroll to hang here in the alcove where I can see it every day. He took up the scroll and read these words. The children of God are very dear, but very queer, very nice, but very narrow. He looked at the boys. What do you think of it? He said. They talked at one another. We do not understand it, sir, Jiya said at last. Since he was a little older than Kino, he felt he should speak. Old gentleman shook his head and laughed softly. Ah, we are all the children of God, he said. Then he put on his spectacles and looked hard at Jiya. "Well," he said, "will you be my son?" Jiya turned very red. He had not expected to have the question put to him so suddenly and so directly. Old gentleman saw he found it hard to speak. "Say yes or no," he told Jiya. "Those are not hard words to say."